All right, welcome to one of the most important fitness videos you've ever seen, because I really hope that after watching this, you will be fundamentally thinking differently about the topic of body fat percentages, maintaining different levels of leanness, and you will spend less time Googling questions like, how do I get to 8% body fat? How do I maintain between 8 to 10% body fat year round? Can I stay between 8 to 10% body fat and still make good gains? And you will spend more time thinking about the topics that I'm going to be discussing in this video. And that is, what does it really take to maintain a certain body fat percentage, whether it's 8%, 10%, 12%? How will your lifestyle have to change, not just for 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, but in the long term? How will a typical day in your life look like if you stay that lean? And I think that if more people spend time thinking about those questions and not just how do I get there, then we would see much less otherwise intelligent people banging their heads against the wall over and over and over again when they diet down, try to maintain a certain look, and then they cannot do it, then they blow right back up to where they started, and then they diet again, and they repeat this cycle over and over and over again. To use a career and job analogy here, a very bad and naive way of thinking about choosing a career path for yourself is simply thinking about which job is going to give me the most money, which job will offer me the highest salary, and solely picking your career path off of that. Because obviously then you could be finding yourself in a shitty life situation where your job might be giving you a lot of money, but you're absolutely miserable each and every day in your job. Maybe it doesn't match with your personality, your natural strengths as a person. Maybe you're a more creative, artistic type person, but your job is very technical in nature, involves a lot of math and things like that, not a lot of room for creativity. Maybe you're a more extroverted person, like to interact with people a lot, but your job requires a lot of solitude. It's a very monastic type job, not a lot of interaction with people. And so solely thinking about how much money you're going to make is a very reductionistic way of thinking about your career path. And so similarly in the case of body fat percentages and leanness, when someone diets down to 8% body fat, maybe it has taken him 12 weeks to do that, and then within 4 weeks he's already back up at 12 or 13% body fat because he ate out too much, his food choices weren't low calorie enough, so he couldn't adhere to his macros, he fell off the wagon a little bit, then there are two potential conclusions that you can draw. One is that this person needs to work on his self-discipline. He needs to learn about different strategies when it comes to eating out, or different macro combinations, or maybe he needs to journal each time before he sits down to eat. Or the other conclusion is that maybe this person never actually had the intention in the first place to live the kind of lifestyle that would be required from someone who will stay at 8% body fat. Because he never thought about it. He only thought about the outcome, that I would love looking like that. 8% body fat looks awesome, so I will get there. But he never thought about what it actually takes to stay there. And then when he gets there, then comes the big surprise that, shit, girls and guys or whoever are not all of a sudden coming to applaud me and praise me for being lean. Things are not magically different. However, I do notice that I'm a bit hungrier. I seem to need to get by on lower calories. And then of course you get the age-old questions like, okay, so I dieted down to 8% body fat and my friends are organizing a pizza party this Sunday. How can I manage it? And then it's like, well, buddy, there are three options. A, you don't go to the pizza party. B, you go, but you eat 2 slices of pizza instead of the whole pizza. Or option number 3 is you do eat the whole pizza, but then you will have to diet the day after or the next 2 days. Then they're like, shit, that doesn't sound like much fun. And guess what? It is not much fun. But there are some people for whom it is actually fun, or who just don't mind living that kind of a lifestyle. And those are the people for whom staying at 8% body fat year round is for. So what I want to do in this video is, as objectively as possible, I will try to quantify how much commitment and day-to-day sacrifices are needed to maintain different levels of body fat percentages. And more importantly, we will try to quantify your commitment, your level of dedication, whatever you want to call it, your willingness to make sacrifices in different areas of your life. And then we will plug all this data into a really cool calculator that I'm going to give you for free, of course. And that calculator will give you the lowest body fat percentage you can expect to maintain realistically and reasonably in the long term based on your commitment in the different areas we will talk about. So I'm gonna cut this intro off here, and now we will get into the meat of this video, and we will now look at the different areas in which you will have to make different sacrifices to attain different levels of leanness. So the way this is gonna work is I will show you a number of different areas in your life that you will have to manage, such as your food choices, social events. You will see what those are in a minute. And in each of these areas, there will be different levels of commitment we will distinguish between. And each of these commitment levels will get different scores. So if you have X level of commitment, you will get 0 points or 10 points or 20 points or whatever. And based on the aggregate, the sum of your points, you will get the body fat percentage that is reasonable for you to strive for. Now, don't worry about trying to add up the points while watching this, because you will get a calculator at the end of this video, and you can check that out already now as you're watching this, but don't click away just yet, watch the video first, and then use the calculator. So area number one that we will talk about is your food choices, your day-to-day food choices. That is the number one most important thing to talk about, and this makes sense. I mean, most of us eat 3 to 5 meals a day, that is 21 to 35 meals a week, and assuming that most of that is eaten at home or at least is prepared by ourselves, it just naturally follows that that is the most important thing to get right. So if you really mess this one up, you obviously won't get very far in your quest for staying lean. So tier number one that we have here is just eating whatever you want. So basically at this point, you're eating like any of your friends that are not into fitness or any person that you see on the street, except that you're eating a high protein diet, which is of course required for your lifting goals. But otherwise, your food choices are basically dictated by your taste preference and just whatever you wish to eat in the moment. So that will be tier number one, and you will get minus 10 points for this. This is obviously not gonna get you very far if you wanna stay lean. Then we have tier number two, and this is eating quote-unquote healthfully. So essentially, you're prioritizing health, you're trying to make good food choices in terms of they are micronutrient dense, and you're having a very inclusive versus exclusive mindset when it comes to eating. You're not necessarily trying to actively eliminate certain things from your diet, you're just trying to include a certain number of veggie and fruit servings, fiber servings, those kinds of things, but you're not really conscious of the energy density of your diet. So you still have a lot of starches and full fat stuff in your diet, and you're not super anal about trying to keep your food choices lower calorie so that you can be satisfied and satiated on lower energy intake. So for this one, you're gonna get 10 points. And then we have tier number three, which is essentially the same as the previous one, except that in this case, you're more mindful that your food choices are lower calorie, higher volume, you're not eating as many full fat stuff, you are not eating as many starches, and you're more conscious to still stay satiated and satisfied on a lower energy intake. So for this one, you're gonna get 30 points. And then we have tier number four, which is obviously eating either according to a strict meal plan or eating according to a strict macro budget. So in each case, basically you're setting an energy budget for yourself for the day. Let's say it's 2,400 calories. And then either you're tracking each of your meals and you're making sure that you're not exceeding your calorie target in your individual meals, or you're taking your macros and your calories and you're making a meal plan off of that, and you can just follow that automatically and on autopilot. And if you're doing this, then in theory at least, you can basically maintain as lean of a physique as you wish, assuming of course that you can adhere to this. So that will be the first area to discuss, and then we have social meals and eating out. This one is not as important as your day-to-day food choices, but as you know, restaurant meals are very high calorie often, and even if you're not eating those on a daily basis and you're only doing it once or twice a week, if you really mess this one up, this can make a meaningful difference in how lean you can stay. So we will have 4 tiers here as well. Tier number one is making liberal food choices multiple times a week. So by liberal food choices, I mean basically not sweating it at all. So you're just going out, not really caring about how high calorie your food choices are, not really caring necessarily about protein either. You're just eating what you want to order. And by multiple times a week, I mean any more frequently than maybe 2, maybe 3 times a week. That is pretty uncommon to do so where I'm living in Europe, but I know that in many parts of the US, it's not uncommon practice to eat out basically every day. So if you're doing that with high calorie food choices that rack up the numbers really fast, then obviously that can be a big problem. So for this tier, you're also gonna get minus 10 points. Then tier number 2 will be eating out once or twice a week with liberal food choices. So it's basically the same as the previous one, you're just doing it less frequently. And I guess that is how most people tend to have social meals. They are more structured, a bit more strict over the course of the week, and then they let a bit loose on the weekends, for example, when they go out to have a nice, tasty meal. So for this one, you're gonna get 10 points again. And then we have tier number 3, which is when I eat out, I make reasonable choices. So This could mean a couple of things. This could mean that you're not going for the highest calorie, most ridiculous food choices possible when you go out. So you have some level of mindfulness. Maybe you're making sure to have a protein dominant meal, or maybe you are picking your side dish a bit more mindfully. Instead of cheesy French fries, you're getting grilled veggies, or maybe you're not getting dessert. Or maybe you are very liberal with what you're ordering, but then in the next following days, you're making up for it in some way. Not completely, you're not super anal about fully compensating for it, but you're making a bit lower calorie food choices in the days to come. This will be tier number 3, and for this one, you're gonna get 20 points. And then we have tier number 4, which is by whatever means, when you eat out, you make sure that no damage is done. So this could be either done by being very strict with what you're ordering. So you're giving special instructions to the waiter if need be. You're telling them that you don't want oil on your salad. Or it could be that you're making up for it very, very meticulously and strictly in the days to come when you eat out. So you're having a low calorie day on the day of eating out, and then you're dropping your calories as well systematically in the following days. That will be tier number 4. And for this one, you're gonna get 30 points. Now, these first 2 areas that we discussed so far, so your day-to-day food choices and eating out, are the most important areas to get right. So if you're really messing these ones up, you're not gonna get very far in your quest for staying lean, because as you could see, in total, you could get 70 points in these 2 areas. And in total, you can collect 110. So that kind of gives you an idea of the priorities here. Now, the next factors we'll discuss and give points for are not factors that are directly influencing your body fat percentage and how lean you can stay, but they are areas which can influence your adherence, which of course is very, very critical. So if you really mess these ones up, you will be able to stay considerably less lean as if you got them reasonably right. So let's get into them. All right, as you may notice, the lighting changed a little bit because several hours later, I just noticed that my audio got messed up and I just recorded about 20 minutes worth of footage with the wrong audio, but no worries, I'll do it again. I enjoy talking about this stuff. So the first such area that I just mentioned before is going to be your circadian rhythms. You may have heard of this phrase before, and it refers to this phenomenon where most biological systems in your body are operating in a rhythmic fashion. Whether it's your satiety and hunger mechanisms, whether it's when you're getting sleepy and when you're feeling wakeful, all of this is operating on a 24-hour cycle. And essentially, the more regularly you're living your life, the more regularly you're going to bed and waking up, the more strict your meal times are, the better all of these systems are working. And crucially for us, your hunger and satiety mechanisms are going to be working much, much better if you're eating your meals at regular times, and if you're going to bed at roughly the same time each and every day, and you're waking up at roughly the same time each and every day. And the more frantic and random you are with all of these things, the worse these mechanisms are going to be. So if you're going to bed at random times, you're waking up at random times, you're eating your meals at completely random times, you're gonna be more and more susceptible for random hunger pangs during the day. Your satiety responses won't be as good. So if you're not tracking your macros, you will be more likely to overeat subconsciously. And even if you do track your macros, you will be just more likely to not adhere as well. So we, once again, will distinguish between 3 different tiers actually. Tier number 1 is your circadian rhythms are a complete mess. So you're waking up at random times every day, you're going to bed at random times every day, you're kind of living like a teenager, and obviously this is going to be an issue. So if you're completely random and frantic with your lifestyle management, that's not gonna get you very far, or at the very least it can be problematic. So for this one, you're gonna get 0 points. Tier number 2 is your schedule and your circadian rhythms are pretty good for the most part, but sometimes they are off. And I think this is pretty common. So you might be pretty structured and strict for 5 days of the week during the weekdays, and then on the weekends you may be going out, partying a little bit, you go to bed later than usual, then you sleep in the next day, maybe you're having a different meal schedule on the weekends, and it just throws things off a little bit, but it's not terrible. And you might apply the same score here if, even though you're doing the best you can for the most part, you just have a naturally difficult time getting, for example, high quality deep sleep for enough hours every day. So even though you're going to bed at the right time, you're not having caffeine before bed or doing silly things like that, you just wake up during the night multiple times, or you wake up in the morning earlier than you would want to, and this is despite your best efforts. And this is me, actually, many times. So for this one, you're gonna get 5 points. And then, of course, tier number 3 is that everything is in order. You're basically a walking clockwork. you're going to bed at the same time every day, you're waking up at the same time every day, your meal times are perfectly timed and scheduled, and everything is just as it should be. So for this one, you're going to get 10 points. The next area we will talk about is your activity levels. So obviously, how lean you can stay and what body fat percentage you can maintain is primarily determined by energy balance and how low of an energy intake you can maintain in the long term and what you can adhere to in the long term. So from that standpoint, essentially, in theory at least, the more active you can stay every day, the better. So tier number 1 here will be you're very, very inactive. You're basically a sloth. You're lying on the couch all the time. You're driving to work. You're barely getting in any physical activity besides going to the gym and lifting. So when you're at home, you're only getting up from the couch when you're going to the toilet or you're preparing a meal and you're driving to your workplace, all of those things. For this one, you're going to get 0 points. It definitely is not going to help if you're living like this. Tier number 2 will be you're somewhat active, you're lightly active. So this could mean that you're commuting to your workplace, maybe it's 15-20 minutes away from where you live, so you're getting in that kind of physical activity. Maybe you have a standing desk, or maybe you're going to take a few light walks during the day to walk your dog or whatever. If you're tracking your steps and you're getting in 10 to 15K steps a day, this is pretty much going to land you here. This is tier number 2, and for this you are going to get 5 points. And then tier number 3 will be you're very, very active. So maybe you have a demanding job, maybe you're doing physical work at a construction site or something. Maybe you're participating in another sport like martial arts or some team sport, which will burn a lot of extra calories. Maybe you're doing significant amounts of cardio. If you're tracking your steps, then 25,000 steps might get you here. But in practice, probably you will still need to do some extra activity to boost your energy expenditure so you can get to this tier. For this one, you're going to get 10 points. The next thing we will discuss is your relationship with food. So as you know, there is the spectrum where you can either view food as pure pleasure, a source of hedonic pleasure, something you're just deriving a tremendous amount of happiness and pleasure from, or solely as fuel. This is what my body needs, so that is what I'm gonna eat, and food serves no other purpose. And people move within this spectrum. Everybody has a certain spot that they take up on this spectrum. So tier number 1 is obviously going to be food is fun, food is pleasure. It is one of the best, most awesome things in life. Everybody has something that makes them excited to wake up in the morning. For some, it's video games. For others, it's their work. For others, it's relationships. For you, it is your meals. I mean, each and every day might have a set of challenges. You never know what tomorrow brings. Scary and confusing things are happening in the world. But at least one thing is for sure is that you will have your tasty and awesome meals. And of course, each meal has its downside. And that downside is that at one point, you're going to have your last bite and you will have to wait another few hours for your next meal. In short, you're a bit obsessed about food and you have a mildly disordered relationship with eating. And of course, this is not going to help if you want to stay very lean. So for this one, you are going to get 0 points. Then tier number 2 is kind of in between. You enjoy eating, you like your meals, but you don't have an emotional relationship with food. So you like eating, but if for some reason you cannot have your regular meals or you can't have your regular fun rituals around food, you're not getting upset about it. You like eating, but you're not obsessed about food. That will be tier number 2. For this one, you're going to get 5 points. And then tier number 3 is food is fuel and you, my friend, are a robot. So you don't care about food, you don't give a shit about it, you don't get what all the fuss is about with people and eating and putting together these awesome recipes. I mean, it's freaking food, it fuels my body and it's all gonna end up in the toilet anyway, right? So why would people obsess over this? You don't give a crap, and that is your relationship with food. For this one, you're gonna get 10 points. And this is one point where we have to pick up on something, and that is we will give lower or higher points for some of these things, but it's not a value judgment. It is solely what's going to be the most functional in terms of helping you to stay lean. And obviously, if you have this robot-like mentality when it comes to food, it's going to be helpful if you want to stay at 8% body fat and you have to get by on a lower energy intake. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's objectively better. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's good if you enjoy your meals and you like eating. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But in terms of helping you to stay lean, it's good to have this very robotic relationship with eating. And then the last thing we will talk about is mindfulness, or how mindfully you're eating your meals, which essentially just boils down to how distracted you are while you're eating. Because basically, the more distracted you are, the less receptive your brain is to the satiety signals that you're getting from your meal. Basically, your brain is the governing organ. That is the one that is receiving the signals like hunger and satiety. And if you have other things, such as a TV show that you're watching or a YouTube video you're watching or something like that, essentially the signals that you're receiving from eating that meal, like satiety and fullness, are blunted because there are other things that are interfering with that signal. So if you're always doing something else while you're eating, it's going to be more likely that either you are gonna overeat subconsciously if you're not tracking your macros, or even if you are tracking your macros, you're gonna be more likely to fall off the wagon and not adhere to your meal plan or macro plan, because you will be less satiated and satisfied from your food and your meals, and you will have to exert more willpower to not fall off the wagon. So we will have 3 tiers as well. Tier number 1 is your meals are essentially a virtual reality fest. You never miss out on the opportunity to have a screen, something to look at, something to watch. You're either watching your favorite TV show, or you're catching up on your YouTube subscriptions, or you're actively actually web surfing. And if your phone battery is dead and you cannot watch something by the time you start with your meal, you would rather delay your meal with another hour because you cannot not do something else while you're eating. That's gonna be tier number 1. For this one, you're gonna get 0 points. Tier number 2 is sometimes you're mindful, sometimes you aren't. So you might have 2 meals in your days when you're eating mindfully, and then maybe 1 or 2 other meals when you're doing something like watching a video. Or maybe you have a few days worth of streak where you're mindful and you're not distracted while you're eating. And then for another couple of days, you're a bit more distracted. You're kind of on and off with this whole mindfulness thing. That's gonna be tier number 2. And for this one, you're gonna get 5 points. And then of course, tier number 3 is you're super mindful while you're eating. Essentially, your meals are a little meditative practice. You're super in tune with how you're feeling while you're eating, how the food tastes, how it smells, all the sensations. That is obviously gonna be super helpful if you want to feel satisfied and satiated from a potentially lower energy intake, and that's gonna be helpful if you want to stay very lean. So there you have it, guys. Those were the 6 areas that we discussed: your day-to-day food choices, your social meals, your activity levels, your circadian rhythms, your relationship with food, and your level of mindfulness while you're eating. And the sum of all of these is gonna give you the body fat percentage that you can realistically expect to maintain. So now I'm going to show you the calculator in which you can plug in all your data, and you will be able to check what's a good body fat percentage for you to strive for. And that can eliminate a lot of headache. Instead of asking me or Eric Helms or whatever, some of your favorite fitness experts about, do you think I can maintain this or that body fat percentage? You can check this calculator every once in a while and see where you're standing. And if you would want to maintain 8% body fat, but this calculator gives you 12, maybe there is a reason for it, because maybe there are some habits in your life that are just not allowing you to stay that lean, or maybe it shows you that there are some priorities and just some things that you value too much, such as social meals, that make it non-viable for you to stay at 8% body fat. And then you can draw the conclusions for yourself. Do I want to change these things? Do I want to give these things up? Is staying at 8% body fat so important to me? Or maybe it means that for now, it's just not worth it for me to try to be that lean. And maybe another time in another period in my life where my priorities might be changing, it's gonna be more reasonable for me to try to do that. So this calculator is gonna be awesome. And now let's take a look at how it's working.
Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is go to this article that I'm going to be linking in the show description called Your Ideal Body Fat Percentage Calculated, the same title as that of the video. It's basically the same thing, just elaborated on in much more detail. So I recommend that you actually read the article. I mean, successful people read, right? All the cool and smart people read a lot. That's something that I heard a lot of times. So you scroll to the bottom of it. Here there is this link. Use this link to access your calculator. You will either have to download this calculator in Excel or open it in Google Sheets. I'm going to open it with Microsoft Excel online, and then we'll take a look at how this calculator works. Okay, so your dedication and body fat score. So here you can see the categories: your day-to-day food habits, social eating, circadian rhythms, activity levels, relationship with food, and mindful eating. So first of all, I'm going to give you an idea of how this calculator works. So let's say that I want to maintain 10% body fat or 8% body fat. Let's say 8 to 10% body fat year round. And for my food choices, I'm selecting that I'd like to eat whatever I want. So you can see now that basically no matter how perfect I am in all the other areas, the lowest body fat percentage I will be able to maintain is 12% body fat, because there is just no way in hell that I can just eat whatever kinds of foods each and every day and be at 8 to 10% body fat. There is just no way. Of course, if I have a robot-like mentality and my circadian rhythms and meal times are super strict and I'm eating very mindfully, I can still be very lean. I mean, 12% body fat is very lean, but there is just no way that I will be 10% body fat. It may still happen for some people, but for the average person, absolutely not. Now, I want to show you how I was eating about 2 years ago, where for the most part, I was hovering between 9% body fat and 11% body fat. So I will try to put up a picture on the screen for you to see. So at that time, I was eating low-calorie foods for the most part, but I didn't track my macros. When I ate out, I basically made sure that there was no damage done. So I usually was fairly liberal. I wasn't a complete moron about my food choices. So I picked some protein-dominant meal every time, and I was eating low-calorie foods for my other meals that day. And then on the next days, I was dropping my fat content in my meals a little bit. So I systematically reduced my calorie intake to accommodate that. My sleep schedule and circadian rhythms were sometimes shitty, and I was doing my best. I'm genetically just not a very good sleeper. It's hard for me to get really good sleep, so I will give myself a 5 here. I was decently active. I wouldn't say I was very active. I was walking a fair amount every day, but I wasn't on the cardio machines all the time, and I definitely didn't have a demanding job. In terms of my relationship with food, I would say I enjoyed food, but I made a conscious effort to eliminate that emotional connection that I used to have with food prior to that. So I would say I had a healthy relationship with food. I will give myself a 5. And as far as mindfulness, I would say I was very mindful at this time. So I will give myself a 10 here. And long behold, the result we get is 10% body fat here. And that is about right. Sometimes I dipped below 10% body fat, but usually I was hovering around that value. Now, I will conversely show you how I was eating at the peak of my recent bulk, where I was between 15 and 20% body fat near the end, and that wasn't accidental. I was not trying to fight going that high in body fat because I was bulking. I was trying to put on muscle, so I wasn't neurotic about trying to stay lean. So at that time, I would say I was making reasonable food choices. I was eating healthfully. I was promoting a good nutrient-dense diet. I wasn't eating complete crap foods, but I wasn't trying to eat low-calorie foods on purpose, and I was not tracking my macros. As far as eating out, I would say I made reasonable food choices. I was making up for these meals out a little bit, so I was eating lower calorie foods in my other meals on those days, but I wasn't anal about that either. And then as far as sleep is concerned, pretty much the same as before. I don't think I ever had a period in my life where I was just a sleeping machine and I just woke up in the morning after like 9 hours of sleep, not even knowing what happened before because I was just out. That only happens if I'm completely exhausted the day before. So I will give myself a 5 here. I was lightly active still. And yeah, all this other stuff is pretty much unchanged, except that I wasn't that mindful. I was sometimes eating mindfully, some other times I didn't. And yeah, sure enough, 15% body fat is the lowest body fat percentage that someone could expect to maintain doing this. And yeah, I was definitely not lower in body fat than 15% at this time. Now, I will try to take myself back to about a year prior to that, at which point I was hovering between 11% and maybe 13% body fat at that time. I will also put up a picture here. And at that time, I was also eating pretty low calorie foods for the most part, not strict meal plan, a low calorie diet for the most part, not low calorie diet, but I was eating satiating foods. When I ate out, I made reasonable food choices. So again, not super anal about making up for my food choices, but I was fairly liberal. Pretty much all the other factors were unchanged in this case as well. And yeah, that's about right. 12% body fat is the lowest that someone could expect to maintain doing this. And that was actually me at the time. And mind you, I did not design this solely off of what works for me, but based on what I think will work for the majority of you guys. So I think if you're using this calculator, once again, you will be able to see that, okay, with these habits that I currently have, is it worth it for me to start fantasizing about, oh wow, I will get down to 8% body fat? Because you may be able to see here that, okay, based on what I'm doing now and based on what I enjoy doing, it is more than likely that if I get down to 8% body fat, it's just going to be one of those stories where I will be able to adhere to my meal plan or macro plan for the duration of the diet until I get down to 8% body fat. But once I'm there, it is just unlikely that I will be able to maintain that. And probably I will be finding myself soon enough at 12-13% body fat within a month, and then it's just going to be a big disappointment. However, maybe at another time, you will actually find that actually I could easily maintain 8% body fat if I wanted to. I just need to change my food choices a little bit, and I wouldn't mind that whatsoever. And then you can actually just ignore all the people that are trying to be super smart and caution you against trying to stay super lean, because you will find that for you, it is actually very, very doable to stay super lean. Just for fun, actually, for the end, I will do this one for Ivan Gavranic, who was on my podcast before. Obviously, I don't exactly know what he's doing, but based on my conversation with him, you will be able to hear that conversation on the podcast if you search for his name, Ivan, on my YouTube channel or on the podcast. So he is eating according to a macro plan. He, as far as I know, he doesn't really eat out, but I'm pretty sure that even if he does, he will make sure that there's no damage done. His sleep, I will give him a 5 here, because as far as I know, he, you know what, I'm going to give him a 10, because I know that he is really anal about how he's managing that. I know that he has some difficulties with that, but at the same time, he's going to be very early. He's very protective with his time and schedule. So I will give him a 10 here. Activity levels, I know that he is very active. He's doing a lot of cardio. Each and every day, he's doing like an hour of cardio at least. He's doing 20,000 steps every day, and he's also working out 7 days a week. Relationship with food. This one is a tricky one. I know that he does enjoy food, but at the same time, I know that he's the kind of guy who would not mind doing crazy things when it comes to food. So I'm going to give him a 10 here. And mindful eating, I believe he did mention to me that he does catch up on his YouTube subscriptions while he is eating his food. So, you know what, let's take away 5 points from him here. And lo and behold, the result is as low as 6% body fat. And I guess if we boost this with the fact that he has definitely an above average willpower and just an all-around kind of stoic mentality to life, then maybe we could boost this point count by a number of points. But yeah, he is staying at around 6% body fat. He probably stays under that for significant periods as well. But yeah, he is an exception to the rule. And he will be the first one to tell you that staying that lean is more or less a full-time job. But here's just an interesting example for you to see. So yeah, guys, this will be the calculator. I encourage you to use it. And I hope you will find this valuable, and this will be a useful ally for your fitness journey going forward. So guys, if you enjoyed this video, please drop a like, a comment, let me know what you thought, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and hit that bell notification icon as well to be sure that you're up to date on shit like this in the future. So thank you so much for your attention, and I can't wait to talk to you soon the next time. Ciao.